Hi, I'm Thora. And this year, I got invited to my family New Year's Eve dinner just not to sit at the table. My sister smirked, looked me in the eye, and said, "Your plate's outside with the dogs." But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing they'd been slowly erasing me for years, cutting me out of photos, giving away my things, forging my name on documents I never saw. And that night, I found out just how far they were willing to go to pretend I never existed. So, I did something I've never done before. I stopped staying quiet. Want to know what I left in the box in front of her plate? I parked 3 houses down, just like always. That corner space under the old street lamp had somehow stayed mine, untouched by time or sentiment. The curb was slick with ice, the snow packed down by earlier arrivals. I sat there for a moment longer than I needed to, engine ticking, headlights off. The gift box rested on my lap, wrapped in brown craft paper, tied with twine, and tagged with a small card I had written in pen. Careful cursive. My hands had trembled when I wrote it. Not because I was cold, but because somewhere in my bones I already knew. The windows ahead glowed gold, shadows shifting behind the curtains. I could hear faint laughter, Callista's laugh, high and showy, bouncing like it belonged in someone else's house. They were already deep into wine and memories, the kind I was no longer part of. I took a breath and stepped out. The cold bit fast, straight through my coat, as if the wind had been waiting for me. I adjusted the scarf at my neck and walked toward the porch. The light above the door flickered on, off, on like it too, was hesitating. I rang the doorbell once. Nothing. I rang again. Footsteps. Then a pause. A long one, long enough to register, long enough to bruise. The door opened, not wide, just enough for a tall young man to appear Callista's son, now taller than I remembered, with a patchy beard and indifferent eyes. He blinked at me like I was a stranger asking for directions, not the aunt who used to take him for ice cream after school. "Hey," he mumbled. Then he turned and walked away without another word, leaving the door open behind him. I stepped inside. The warmth hit me first overpowering, almost artificial. The scent of cinnamon, cloves, glazed ham, pine needles, and something chemical, like a seasonal candle working too hard. The house smelled like it always had, but the comfort was missing. It was too curated now, polished, performed, like stepping into a page of a magazine and realizing no one lives there. I moved down the hallway, heels quiet on the runner rug, past framed photographs that no longer featured me. The latest additions, Callista's family at the vineyard, Vera on her Caribbean retreat, Macy in her graduation robes. There were no empty hooks, just memories rearranged to fit a tighter narrative. The dining room was already full, and perfect. Tall taper candles flickered in brass holders, etched glasses sparkled, and white linen napkins had been folded into shapes, swans maybe. Name cards had been hand calligraphed, placed at every setting like little affirmations. I scanned the table. Vera, Callista, Macy, the neighbors. Even the neighbor's daughter's boyfriend, apparently. But no me. Every plate had a name, except one. At the far end of the table sat an elaborate centerpiece berries, branches, a pillar candle, and no chair. No place. I waited, still holding the box, still hoping someone would notice. That someone would smile and say, "Oh, we forgot to set yours." But no one looked up. They carried on, sipping wine, refilling gravy boats, adjusting napkins. I turned toward the buffet, where my mother was arranging dishes. Her back was turned, shoulders tight as she spooned candied yams into a white ceramic bowl. "Mom?" I said gently. She didn't look at me. Instead, she moved toward the oven, as if some invisible timer had gone off. So I tried again, this time quieter. "I think you forgot my seat." From the table, without even a glance, Callista said, "Your plate's outside." "With the dogs." Just like that, like I was the help. Or a ghost. No one laughed. Not even a nervous chuckle. A cousin cleared his throat into a napkin. Another buttered his roll. Someone poured more wine. I looked around the room. No one would meet my eyes. Vera fiddled with a cheese tray. My mother stayed frozen at the oven, her back still to me. Macy looked down at her phone, tapping something quickly urgent. Anything but this. My chest felt tight, my face hot, but my feet stayed still. I didn't cry, I didn't shout. I just stood there for a moment, letting the silence speak, letting their actions confirm what I had spent years trying not to believe. They didn't forget me. They just didn't plan for me. And somehow, that hurt more than being left out. It meant they had sat around a table, discussed placements, made decisions, and I had not been part of the equation, not even an afterthought, just air. I looked down at the gift box again. The twine had slipped a little, unraveling at the knot. I tugged it tight. I had wrapped it with care. A hand-poured candle I'd made myself, scented with orange peel, clove, and cedar. Things I thought still meant warmth, meant family. I stepped forward, walked the length of the table, and placed the box gently in front of Callista's plate. She looked up at me, confused, like I'd broken the choreography, like I'd committed some social trespass. I leaned in slightly, close enough for her to hear. My voice didn't shake. We're not done. And I meant it. I turned on my heel, coat still buttoned, scarf still snug, giftless but not empty. My heels echoed as I walked back through the hallway, past the curated photos, past the laughter I used to belong to. No one called after me, no one followed. But this time, I wasn't leaving to cry in the car. I wasn't leaving wondering what had done wrong. This time, I was taking that silence with me and turning it into something they couldn't control. Not anymore. What they didn't know was that this time, I had come prepared. I didn't storm out the front door like I used to. No tears, no drama, just silence and snow. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to decide if I should go home or drive somewhere else, anywhere else. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Eventually, I circled the block and parked again, this time closer to the side entrance. I slipped back in without being noticed. The hallway smelled like rosemary and heat, like nothing had changed. But it had. I had. I brushed the frost from my coat sleeve and walked quietly past the mudroom and into the living area. No one looked up. No one even acknowledged my return. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the space that had always been mine, once upon a time. I didn't take a seat at the table, I knew better. I slid onto the piano bench in the corner, tucked just enough into the room to witness everything, just far enough to remain invisible. That's how they preferred me lately, present, but not counted. Then came the slideshow. Callista's voice rang out with the kind of fake cheer you'd expect from a realtor selling a home that smelled of mildew. Everyone ready for a walk down memory lane? Let's look at our year together 2023, Durant style. The lights dimmed. The screen flickered to life. And I waited to see where I fit in. There were photos of Macy's school recital, Vera's birthday brunch, Callista's new listing event, Thanksgiving at the lake house, even the 4th of July barbecue in the backyard I helped paint 2 summers ago. But me? Not a single frame. Even the moments I remembered clearly baking pies with Mom in March, helping clean out Dad's old shed in June, had been edited out like I never existed. I looked around. Everyone laughed and pointed at the screen. Someone called out, "Oh, that was the night we ran out of propane." More laughter. I remembered that night. I was the one who brought extra tanks. I even drove out to the store when Callista forgot to pick them up. But in their version of the story, I hadn't been there at all. A knot formed in my chest. Not grief, not quite anger. Something in between, hollow pressure. Like the slow realization that no one was coming to save your seat after all. And then, like clockwork, Vera stood up, holding a small lacquered box in her hands. "Russell loved doing this every year," she said with a sentimental sigh. "We should honor that. Red envelopes." Dad had started the tradition one for each family member, with a handwritten message inside. "Luck for the year ahead," he used to say. Vera walked around the room, calling names, smiling, pressing an envelope into each hand. "For Macy," she said. "For your hard work at school." for Nathan, to a cousin I barely recognized, for your move to Chicago. She made her way around the table, touching shoulders, nodding warmly. Then came my side of the room. She passed by me without even pausing. Nothing. Not even a glance. One cousin looked up briefly, confusion flickering across his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. No one else reacted. No one asked. I sat still. My fingers dug into the edge of the bench. I didn't cry. That was the old me. Instead, I replayed the slideshow in my mind. The red envelopes, the edits, the omissions. This wasn't forgetfulness. It was a pattern. And patterns, I've learned, are more dangerous than accidents because patterns are chosen. They didn't just forget to include me. They erased me, intentionally, surgically, piece by piece. Photos, stories, seats, names. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder I hadn't looked at in months labeled Dad Originals. Inside were scanned copies of old letters, photos, a voice memo I'd saved from one of our last phone calls. As I stared at the screen, a quiet heat bloomed behind my ribs. Not rage, not yet. But something was shifting. I wasn't going to ask for space anymore. I wasn't going to wait for an invitation back into a family that had decided I was easier to forget. This wasn't about revenge. It was about memory. And memory, when preserved, right, could do what people refused to. There was power in what they chose to forget, but more in what I chose to remember. I left the dining room quietly, moving past the laughter, past the clinks of glasses, past the warmth I once believed I could return to. No one noticed. That was the most consistent part of the evening. My absence never created a ripple. They'd grown comfortable in my silence. I wasn't going to give them that comfort anymore. The upstairs hallway was dimly lit. The same old framed watercolor of the lake house still hung crooked near the thermostat. I passed the guest room aunts mine when I came home for holidays and paused. The door was closed. I didn't open it. The calendar hanging on the wall outside was still turned to October. The birthdays circled in blue ink weren't mine. I made my way down toward the side kitchen, thinking I'd just breathe for a moment. That maybe I could open a window, let out the heat pressing against my skin. But before I reached it, I saw something on the console table beside the stairs. A small stack of unopened envelopes. Holiday cards. The kind you stick in a drawer or pretend you'll open when guests leave. Mine was right on top. Same gold foil trim. My handwriting, neat and measured. Postmarked December 5th. I had written, "I hope it feels like home this year." It hadn't. The flap was unbroken, not even smudged. No one had cared enough to open it. I picked it up for a second, just to feel the weight of it. The card wasn't heavy, but the meaning was. I didn't put it back. I slid it into my coat pocket without a sound. As I turned the corner into the laundry hallway, voices stopped me cold. The door wasn't fully shut. She always makes things about herself. Vera's voice low, sharp cut clean. Callista replied, a short laugh wrapped in spite. Russell spoiled her. You know that. Every time he looked at her, she acted like the world owed her something. They weren't whispering. They weren't cautious. She's fragile, Vera said. Always was. Couldn't handle the world unless someone protected her from it. That's not real life. We helped her grow up by stepping back. I didn't flinch. Not outwardly. Callista added, she's here to make us feel guilty. And when that doesn't work, she'll storm out like she always does. Watch. It was like being punched without being touched. I backed away from the door, careful not to let the wood creak. I didn't go far. I ducked into the laundry room, sat down on the cold floor against the washing machine, and closed my eyes. I remembered the first time Dad taught me how to use that machine. He labeled the settings with Sharpie so I wouldn't shrink Mom's sweaters. His writing had faded, but the lines were still there. The scent in the air hadn't changed, fresh linen and lemon detergent. My palms were sweating, though, and something inside me had started to cool all at once. I pulled out my phone, scrolled. Photos from last spring, me and Dad building the raised garden bed. He was already thin, already slower, but still smiling. I'd taken a video of him explaining how to reinforce the frame. His voice steady, his hands certain. I sent it to the family group chat that day. No one responded. None of those photos had made it into tonight's slideshow. None of the laughter, none of the shared sweat, none of the joy we actually earned. They weren't just forgetting me. They were curating their version of history, one where I was inconvenient, difficult, optional. They wanted a memory clean of my fingerprints. I opened my email app, typed in the address of the family's longtime attorney, Mr. Harris, a man who once gave me licorice when I had to sit through probate meetings after Dad died, a man who'd known our family for 3 decades. Subject: request for documentation. Body: hi! I'd like a certified copy of my father's original will. Please advise if it's available digitally or if I need to collect it in person. I stared at the screen. No dramatic declarations, no demands. Just a quiet step towards something that had always belonged to me. I hit send. If truth wouldn't be given room at the table, I'd make sure it had a voice. I stepped back into the living room just as the second wave of praise erupted near the Christmas tree. Macy stood front and center, holding a wrapped book in her hands, like she had won it in some kind of academic lottery. It wasn't the gift that made me stop mid-stride. It was the tag dangling from the ribbon. With love, Aunt Callista. I didn't say a word. Weeks ago, I had picked that exact book out, rare edition, author signed. Macy loved old fantasy novels, and it was the one thing we still connected on. It even asked the shop owner to wrap it with green velvet paper. I stood in line for 20 minutes to get that exact paper. I remembered writing the tag, to Macy from Aunt Thora. But here it was. The paper was the same. The handwriting wasn't mine anymore. As Macy hugged Callista and held the book to her chest like it was sacred, Vera clapped, saying, "You're always so thoughtful, Cal. You really know what matters." I pressed my fingers into my palms so hard they left crescent-shaped dents. Before I could react, my eyes caught movement across the room. Macy twirled in a dress I hadn't seen in years, but I recognized it instantly. Pale green silk, slightly too long for her legs, hem lifted just enough to reveal her ankles. It was mine, more than mine. Dad gave it to me on my 19th birthday, said it reminded him of Mom's eyes before she stopped dancing around the house in the mornings. Said he wanted me to wear it on the first day I felt powerful enough to take up space again. I never did. But I kept it, hung it in a garment bag in the closet upstairs. I hadn't seen it since the last time I visited. A cousin nearby smiled and said, "That dress is a classic. Where'd you find it, Macy?" Before she could answer, Vera chimed in. "It was just sitting around. No one used it for years. Better someone wear it who appreciates it." I didn't correct her. Not yet. I turned away and walked slowly toward the stairwell landing, drawn by some instinct I couldn't name. A place I hadn't stood in years. The wall used to be filled with framed moments, Dad's bowling trophy photo, my graduation from Emory, a goofy picture of Callista in a Halloween bee costume. The wall was still full, but not with us. It was now a curated shrine to Callista's real estate awards, Macy's piano recitals, even a framed article Vera had been mentioned in for donating to a local charity. There was no sign I had ever walked across that hardwood in my cap and gown. No summer shot with me, Dad, and the lemon tree I bought for his birthday. Not even the photo of us repainting the porch, just Callista, laughing with a roller brush in a completely fabricated memory. I stepped closer and noticed a faint square outline on the wall, where the paint was slightly lighter. And there, just below eye level, single nail still stuck out. My photo had hung there once. Now, it was just a ghost on the wall. My heart didn't break. It quieted, settled into a kind of stillness that didn't need confirmation anymore. I walked down the steps and into the hallway as Vera came around the corner with a tray of drinks. I didn't stop her. I stepped in her path, gently but firmly. "That dress wasn't forgotten," I said. "It was stolen." She blinked. The tray didn't tilt, but her grip tightened. "This isn't the time," she said through her teeth. "Then find time," I replied, voice calm. Because I'm done watching you pretend I never existed. She didn't argue. She just walked around me, tray steady, eyes forward. But her shoulders, those hunched slightly more than usual. I stood there for a moment, alone in the hallway, then reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Not to scroll, not to distract. I opened the voice memo app, titled the file for later. Hit record. I started speaking. Not loud, but clear. The facts. The dates. The pattern. Who said what? What was taken? What was claimed? I didn't need to make a scene. I just needed the truth to exist somewhere no one could erase it again. I'd warned them gently, directly, and more times than they probably cared to remember. I'd said it with measured tone and clean sentences. I told them what I noticed, what I felt, what they had taken. But words, in this family, had a way of being dismissed as mood swings or melodrama. So I stopped explaining, and I started preparing proof. But before anything could be printed, forwarded, or notarized, something else had to come first. A sentence, spoken out loud, in front of witnesses. No more whispers behind closed doors. No more being difficult for noticing what no one else wanted to name. I stepped back into the living room, where the fireplace cast its flickering glow over the gathering. A few cousins were chatting in clusters, their laughter uneven. Some voices stretched too hard, like they were trying to keep the mood above water. But the tension lingered, just beneath the surface, tight and hot, like a seam ready to split. Vera stood near the hearth, offering glasses of mulled cider like some gracious hostess. Her voice was warm, her smile precise. She moved easily, confident, comfortable, beloved. It used to sting. Tonight, I saw it for what it was. Carefully rehearsed. Her sweater sleeves had pushed up with movement, revealing something that stopped me cold. A silver charm bracelet. Oval charms, smooth and familiar, each one engraved with a letter. Not just letters, my letters. A gift from my father, my college graduation. He had pressed it into my hand and said, "For every step you walked without help, here's something to carry the rest." It had disappeared years ago. I thought I'd misplaced it in a move or left it behind during a holiday. But now I saw it, shining under the soft light on Vera's wrist. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I just walked forward. "That belonged to me," I said. Vera's hand stilled mid-pour. A pause. A flicker in her eyes. Then she tugged her sleeve down slowly and shrugged. "You leave things behind," she murmured. "People forget. I didn't raise my voice. Or they pretend to. Which is worse." Her mouth flattened, just slightly. That one landed. It made a few heads turn. One of our cousins glanced up from his drink. A woman near the fireplace stopped mid-sentence, her gaze quietly shifting toward us. Even Callista, seated in that stiff-backed chair like a self-appointed queen, turned her head. "Thora," she said sharply, "don't start. Not tonight." "Then stop giving me reasons to," I replied. She stood, always needing the physical height advantage, as if elevation could replace integrity. "You're making a scene," she hissed. "I didn't move an inch." "No." I'm pointing at one. Vera's voice joined in, silkier but soaked in ice. "You're ruining the evening. Again." That word. Again. My breath caught. There it was, that familiar trick. Slide in a single word and rewrite the whole narrative. I could see it in her face. They'd been waiting to say it. Again? Like when I missed Easter because I had the flu and nobody called to check? When I asked about Dad's memorial and they said it was taken care of before I even knew the date? Or when I mailed flowers for Mother's Day and Vera said, "Oh, that was you?" They didn't wait for me to ruin things. They engineered the version where I always had. I took a slow breath and locked eyes with Vera. "I'm not ruining anything," I said evenly. "I'm just done pretending this is whole." Someone cleared his throat. Another shifted awkwardly. The room didn't fight me, but it braced like it expected me to unravel. I didn't. "If this family can't handle honesty," I said slowly, "maybe it never earned silence." I watched the impact ripple. Vera blinked too fast. Callista opened her mouth to speak, but said nothing. The room was quiet, too quiet. No one moved. No refills. No murmurs. Even Macy, scrolling on her phone, had paused mid-flick. Callista let out a brittle laugh. You always were dramatic. I tilted my head. No, you just never liked when I told the truth. And that was it. There was no yelling, no thrown glasses, just a silence that spoke of fractures too long ignored. Vera turned on her heel, walking toward the kitchen like she had somewhere more important to be. But I saw Ida quick twitch in her shoulder. A hesitation. It wasn't guilt. Not yet. But it was the beginning of recognition. I didn't follow her. I didn't leave either. I stayed rooted, letting the silence rest on the floor like a dropped glass no one dared to clean up. For so long, they tried to erase me with polite exclusion and gaslighting. But tonight, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't whispering. I was still, clear, and unafraid. They thought silence made them powerful. But truth? Truth spoken calmly and firmly? It has its own gravity. And tonight, they finally felt the pull. I didn't just find the proof. I became the proof. The moment felt eerily familiar, like a memory I hadn't meant to recall. I stepped away from the fireplace, its warmth too performative now, its flickering light casting shadows on the same faces that had once sung me lullabies, and now looked through me like I was already gone. The room buzzed with muted conversation, glassware clinking against denial, laughter too sharp to be sincere. I slipped out quietly, retracing old footsteps down the hallway I'd wandered countless times as a child. Back then, I walked these floors to escape bedtime. Now, I walked them to face the truth. There it was, still nailed to the same spot beside the dusty mirror. The old key hook. 4 hooks. Only one still used. One brass key, oxidized with time, hanging defiantly on the end, as if daring someone to remember what it once unlocked. I reached up and plucked it off with a calm hand, though my heart had already guessed what I might find. Vera hadn't moved it. Maybe she assumed no one remembered, or maybe she believed no one dared. But I dared. I slid the cold key into my coat pocket and moved through the house like a ghost, unnoticed, past the catered kitchen where olives and small talk sat equally untouched, past the polite clinks of wine glasses and the exaggerated compliments about Vera's new backsplash. None of it mattered, not anymore. The back corridor felt colder, quieter. The hallway light buzzed softly above me, flickering every few seconds like it too had grown tired of pretending. I reached the door to the study, still the same brass knob, still that faint lavender scent that tried too hard to mask something older, deeper. The door gave a gentle creak as I pushed it open. I didn't turn on the overhead light. Instead, I walked by instinct to the desk, Vera's desk, the one she never let the children touch, the one she always locked like it held something sacred. Or incriminating. I crouched to the bottom drawer. My fingers didn't hesitate. The key turned with a satisfying click. Inside, time had been cataloged in manila folders and scrawled yellow pads. Receipts from decades ago. Legal letters. Property notes. But one folder stood out immediately, its bold typeface a gut punch. Durant Property Transfer 2022. That was the year the silence got louder. The year decisions started arriving prepackaged. We didn't want to overwhelm you. It was all very standard. No big deal. I'd heard them all, those gentle lies used to camouflage betrayal. I flipped it open. Page by page, it unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Trustee signatures, deed reassignment, clauses about Sock Center, the family cabin we once called ours. Legalese thick enough to drown in. And then I saw it. My name. Right there beneath a signature that wasn't mine. It wasn't even close. The handwriting curved wrong. The angle leaned too far left, like whoever signed it didn't know how I shaped my letters. The H had a wide loop, something I never did. The A looked like it belonged to someone else entirely. They hadn't just forged it, they'd mocked it. And still I didn't panic. I pulled out my phone and angled it beneath the small desk lamp. Soft light, no filters, just the raw, unedited truth. Snap, one page, snap, the next. Every document, every signature, corner to corner. Then again, from new angles. Backup for the backup. Because this time, I wasn't asking anyone to believe me. I was going to show them. When I finished, I placed everything back exactly as it had been. I locked the drawer and stood up slowly, like the gravity in the room had changed. My spine felt straighter, my chest steadier. I walked to the front door and stepped outside. The cold hit me like a slap sharp, cleansing, real. I let it settle into my skin. It reminded me I was still here, still standing. I pulled out my phone again and scrolled to Harristad's old attorney. He used to sit in our kitchen, sipping overbrewed coffee, giving off a calm that made him seem eternal. He knew where all the bones were buried, figuratively speaking. Voicemail, beep. Hi Harris, it's Thora. I found something I think you should see. I'm not sure what's enforceable yet, but if you still have Dad's original file, I'd like a copy. Let me know what I need to do to get it. I didn't over-explain. I didn't plead or apologize. I just hung up and stared out at the silent snow coating the driveway. The world was still moving, but I was no longer stuck in their version of the story. I had a new role, not the forgotten daughter. Not the overlooked heir, the witness, the archivist, the storm. I stepped back inside. The music had shifted, something jazzy and upbeat that felt desperate in its cheerfulness. The room buzzed with empty plates and superficial chatter, as if nothing beneath the surface had cracked. But it had. And I held the fragments in my coat pocket. That's when I saw her. Callista emerged from the guest bathroom, fixing her earring in the reflection of a hallway mirror she couldn't seem to pass without admiring herself. Our eyes met, just for a second, but it was enough. You knew, I said. She blinked, just once. Her smile appeared too quickly, like a curtain dropped over a fire. Knew what? She asked. I didn't answer. I didn't owe her one. I walked past her, slow and steady, not giving her the scene she wanted. She thrived on drama she could distort. I wasn't going to be the villain in her version. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just reached into my pocket and touched the phone, the folder's photos, the evidence, the truth, and the plan. One I no longer needed their permission to begin. And when you hold truth that heavy in your hand, silence is no longer survival. It becomes participation. I walked back into the main hall just as Vera raised her glass to signal the second part of the evening. We've got one more surprise, she announced cheerfully. Callista and Macy put together something to close out the year. You'll love it. Of course they did. The room dimmed. People settled into their seats, plates cleared, wine glasses half full. And then the slideshow began. Photos of Callista at her award luncheon, Macy playing piano in a school recital, Vera holding a ribbon-cutting scissors at a community event. Each image was captioned in elegant script, each memory neatly framed. Music swelled soft jazz, curated warmth. I watched from the back wall, untouched by the flicker of my own erasure. There were shots of the lake cabin renovation. I painted that deck. They cropped me out. A Thanksgiving group photo had baked the pies. The camera angle cut me out like a bad edit. Even the backyard cookout, where I handed off extra propane tanks when they forgot, replaced with a clip of Callista laughing with tongs in hand. A guest leaned toward his wife and whispered, "Didn't Thora help with that trip?" She shushed him. After the final slide faded and polite applause filled the air, I didn't move. I didn't clap. I scanned the room. They were smiling, proud, unbothered. Until my cousin Danny approached me during dessert, his tone low. I'm sorry. I didn't know it was this bad. I nodded. Most people don't until it's laid out in slides. He didn't defend anyone. He didn't excuse it. That, oddly, was enough. I slipped away from the table and walked toward the media corner, where the laptop still sat connected to the projector. No one stopped me. They assumed I was going to refill a plate or find my coat. Instead, I pulled out my USB stick. I had labeled the file weeks ago. Still here. I clicked to open it. One photo, no music, full screen. It was me and Dad, summer 2016, fixing the fence after a storm. I was holding the post steady. He had his hand on my shoulder. Both of us squinting at the sun, covered in dust, smiling. Just one moment, unfiltered, undeniable. The room hushed. A few seconds passed. 10, maybe. No voiceover, no transition. Just the truth, still and unavoidable. I didn't say a word. I unplugged the drive and stepped back. Callista stood from her chair too quickly, knocking her napkin to the floor. Her smile faltered, fingers twitching as she reached for a refill that never came. I looked at her. Just looked. She held the stare for 2 beats, then broke it first. That was when I knew she felt it, finally. The distance between performance and reality was no longer a private ache. It was public, shared, witnessed. The crowd didn't applaud. They didn't need to. Because in that moment, everyone saw it. Not just the picture, but the pattern. The years, the revision, the quiet theft. The applause they gave her earlier began to feel hollow even to them. Some truths don't need to be spoken, they just need to be witnessed. By the time dessert plates had been cleared and wine glasses refilled, I knew what was coming. The closing remarks were a tradition Vera never skipped, and this year would be no exception. Except this time, she wouldn't be the one speaking. Callista stood up, her hand resting on the back of Vera's chair like she'd earned that position. She held a folded page in her hand, my handwriting, but not my voice. "I'd like to close tonight with a reflection on what it means to belong," she began. I didn't blink. She spoke slowly, with the kind of manufactured vulnerability that made strangers lean in and relatives nod with approval. Every line was familiar. Because I wrote them, I drafted that speech a month ago, saved it in a shared folder back when I still believed there might be space for me here. As she read, I looked around the room. Heads nodded. Vera dabbed the corner of her eye with a napkin. Someone whispered, "She always knew how to say the right thing. She didn't." But I did. I didn't interrupt. I didn't roll my eyes or call her a liar. I stood from my seat at the edge of the room and walked toward the head of the table. Half the guests turned their heads. The other half pretended not to notice. In my hands was a small craft-wrapped box, unadorned, just a piece of twine tied in a simple knot. I placed it directly in front of Callista's plate and said, "You'll want to open this now." Then I walked to the window and stood with my arms folded, waiting. Callista paused mid-sentence. Her voice wavered. Someone whispered her name. She set the paper down and untied the twine. Inside, a USB labeled Will, Russell Bexley. A notarized copy of the property, deed-dated, stamped, and unaltered. A photograph of me and Dad rebuilding the fence behind the house, sun in our eyes, sweat on our foreheads, and beneath it all, a folded letter in Dad's handwriting. To my daughter, the one who stayed loyal. The room fell into stillness. Vera didn't reach for the box. She looked down at her lap. Her face, always composed, had gone a shade paler than the linen tablecloth. Callista's hand hovered over the photo, unsure whether to touch it or leave it buried under consequence. One uncle near the end of the table mumbled, "So she was the heir?" Another voice, maybe from Vera's sister, followed, softer. "That explains a lot." Callista cleared her throat. This isn't the time." I turned slowly. "No, you're right. That was 10 minutes ago, when you read my words like they belonged to you." Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. "You had the spotlight," I said. This was just light. A few guests shifted in their seats, but no one interrupted. I walked back to the coat rack, slipping on my jacket without hurry. The box remained where it was, open, undeniable. As I pulled on my gloves, Vera stood and took a shaky step toward me. "We can talk about this," she said. I paused, met her eyes, and replied, "That's what I tried. For years." And then I opened the door, not to run, not to retreat, but to walk into something I hadn't felt in a long time. Direction. Leaving didn't feel like escape. It felt like the first honest step forward. Back in Minneapolis, the world moved quieter. The air was colder, but gentler somehow, and the snow outside my apartment window looked less like a burden and more like a fresh page. I sat curled on the couch, my old holly mug steaming in my hands, and watched the light from the street lamps paint soft shadows on the walls. My phone buzzed 3 times that morning, once from Vera, twice from Callista. The last message was short. "We should talk." I didn't answer. He'd already said what I needed to say. And more importantly, I had finally stopped trying to say it to people who had no intention of hearing it. My cat, Nori, blinked at me from the windowsill, her ears twitching every time the radiator clanged. She didn't ask questions, she just stayed. I stood and pulled an envelope from the small stack on my desk. No return address, just the one photo inside, the one from the fence, the one Dad kept in his wallet until the day he died. Me. Him. The old backyard fence. One hand on my shoulder, both of us grinning like we'd built more than wood and wire. No letter, no explanation. I sealed it, walked 2 blocks to the post box, and dropped it in without hesitation. I didn't wait to watch it disappear down the chute. I turned around and walked slowly home. Not grieving, not triumphant, just lighter. A week later, I got a text from Mrs. Halverson, the neighbor who still lived across the street from the Durant house in St. Cloud. It was a photo. It showed the old tool shed behind the house, a place that smelled of cedar and oil, where Dad kept everything from socket wrenches to stray memories. Tacked up above the workbench, slightly crooked, was the picture. No frame, no inscription, just there. The message read, "Someone thought you'd want to know." I stared at it for a long time. Then I saved it. Not to post, not to prove anything, just to keep. Because it meant someone had walked into that shed, held the photo, and chose not to throw it away. They didn't hang it in the living room, not where guests would see. But they didn't hide it either. Some truths are too big for the front of the house. They belong in the spaces that held us first. I didn't respond to the message. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop and started sorting old files. Documents, emails, photos. I renamed a folder, Mine, Fully. Inside it, I placed not just the paperwork from the lawyer, but the voice memos I recorded, the photos I took, and the letter from Dad the original, creased at the edges, in his neat, careful hand. They took the seat. I found the table elsewhere. They changed the script. I published my own memory. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't aching for apology or recognition. I'd unhooked the version of me they tried to flatten into a shadow and let her walk. That version didn't wait for permission. She didn't ask to be invited back in. I stood in front of the apartment window as the first signs of dusk softened the city. My reflection stared back older, sharper, whole. They tried to write around me. I didn't erase them. I just stopped waiting to be seen,